So Tania, thank you so much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership.
Thank you. Thank you
But
so much.
before we go into leadership, can you tell us a little bit more about your own backgrounds? Where did you grow up?
So I'm a born and bred Capetonian. Actually resides from Strand in the Helderberg Basin. I've attended both primary and high school there for most of my years. I think I was born in Stellenbosch, but then my parents moved to Strand when I was 2 years old. So I think what I love about Strand is really just the beach, it's the freedom of that, the nature, and I took a 10-year detour to come back to Strand. So today I'm living in Strand again, and my kids are going also to school there.
So where did you detour to?
Well, we bought our first house in Kells River because back in the early 2000s we couldn't afford a house in Strand. Because I can't even believe I'm saying this, but a 3-bedroom house was like 400,000 rand.
Right.
So we just had always a view that we want to come back to our family. We want to come back to the place where we really found our roots. So we made a 10-year detour, buying in different places, reselling, making a profit, and in the end, 10 years ago, we bought our first ever house in Strand. And now we are actually lucky enough to raise our kids there.
Now, Tania, what was your dream career as you grew up?
I wonder if somebody can really. I don't know if somebody really have a dream career when they grew up. I think I grew up in the 90s. In the education system back then was very different to what it's now. You had your normal subjects: Afrikaans, English, maths, science, biology, some business subjects, and I think you were probably living up to your parents' expectations. Your uncle was, and your grandfather and your dad was a doctor or a lawyer or a businessman, and that's what you wanted. So I never really had a dream job that I could honestly call my name.
Right.
But I think what I've experienced from a very early age is my love for creativity, my love not necessarily in art, traditional creativity, but also just the creativity in terms of voicing my opinion, being part of committees, wanting to lead there, writing in a very simplistic way. Also growing up in that era, it was quite restricted in terms of voicing your opinion. I remember growing up, children should be seen and not heard. So voicing your opinion was very was breaking the norms back in the day, and you weren't really trusted for doing that. But I think a dream career was not something that I ever voiced. I think a dream career for me was really just I think as I moved through my career, I've started realizing very early on which bored me and where did I actually found to make a difference. And I think it was only 10 years into my career when I ended up in marketing, when I realized and actually rediscovered my love for creativity, my love for innovation, in whatever format that might have come to the fore.
So Tania, where did you start your career?
I started my career at Distillers. I studied actually in back in the day, the Cape Technicon, and I did. My course actually consisted out of a 6-month practical, where they've placed you into organizations 3 months into your second year and 3 months into your third year. And I ended up being employed into Distillers Corporation in 1998 as an intern for 3 months. We didn't do a lot, but just the normal intern type of stuff. But I think I obviously made a difference there. I went back, write my final exam, got a call from them saying, "Do you want a holiday job?" And at the time I actually worked as a banking assistant in the old Trust Bank. And it was a great holiday job. And I then initially said, no, you know what, if this is not going to be a permanent employment, I'd rather stay where I am. But the moment I put that phone down, something just told me, you have to phone them back, like you've made a mistake. And I picked up the phone, I phoned them back and I said, you know what, I've actually reconsidered, I'll come and work for you for a month during the December holidays. And those were still the days where big corporates closed from 15 December to 15 January, so you were really the only one there. But again, I think that was just a part of my journey. And come February, I was still there. And the 1st of March, they just offered me a job. Still, I didn't really know what was my purpose there. But now, 20 years later, I think I've really experienced quite a lot of growth in the company. I went through quite a lot of different change within the company, reorganizations. There was obviously the big merger between Distillers and SFW, Stellenbosch Farmers Winery back in the day. So I've started my adult life at Distillers and I'm still there.
So how did you get into marketing?
It was quite a funny story, actually. I think through all the different positions I held within Distillers and Distell, it was very much the first 10 years of my career was based on logistics, the value chain, understanding the supply chain environment, from planning, from production planning to demand planning. It was very much logistics driven. Now I'm absolutely in love with structures and processes, just to actually to shape where companies are going. But funny enough, after 2.5, 3 years, I somehow felt bored. I somehow felt that I've done my bit and I have to move on. So how I actually found, I decided, I think in your career you always want to move up. It's always about a job grade, about a title. But I've made a decision twice in my career to make lateral moves. And the way I got into marketing was actually decided to drop into a job grade because I wanted a completely different change in direction. Now, if you stay in the same field, there is this normal ladder that you can climb. But I have made the decision to actually change complete direction from value chain, supply chain, logistics focus into project management. And I was a project manager in the new product development department. Now, very much structured, very much built on processes. But I was leading projects, and my internal clients and customers was marketing. So if there was any new products that was to be launched, I was the project manager, obviously playing that pivotal role and facilitator between what marketing wants and when they want to launch in market, and actually when what supply chain is actually going to offer them, and trying to find the medium. And that really just gave me a glimpse in marketing. I don't have a marketing degree. I don't have any traditional or tertiary qualification in the marketing discipline. But I realized that actually my creativity, my love for creativity and innovation want me to know more. So through my logistics background and through my project management background, there was an opening in marketing as a brand manager for export buyers' own brands. And I was given the opportunity to actually lead that because that was not traditional marketing. It was not your traditional classical marketing environment. It was also project management, but also relationships. So I had quite a big relationships with our international agents when I was still residing in the export logistics department. And I had the project management know-how in terms of just launching brands and facilitating that process with all the key stakeholders. And that was my very first appointment into marketing. And boy, was that an eye-opener. Not having the textbook background of what marketing is about, and marketing 101, and brand positioning and customer insights. I had to learn a lot on the job. I had to fail forward. I had to make decisions, test my decisions, look at my peers also for that on-the-job know-how. And as I say, the rest is history. And I think I honestly fell in love. And I showed I think I showed my worth in that specific position. and I just transformed and grabbed every opportunity to start working on brands that can make a difference.
Now, Tania, today you're the global brand manager for Benini, and I believe you are taking the brand into a new direction.
Yeah.
I saw that you had quite an innovative event last week. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're evolving the brand and how innovation is playing a major role?
Benini's been around for 20 plus years in Distell. But almost 3 years ago, it was also not a brand that Distell really invested in from an A&P point, advertising and promotional point of view. But we've realized a very sudden growth, especially amongst the young black females of Benini. Now, if you think about the young black female, it's absolutely a rising phenomenon. This young black female really is discovering herself. And what we've realized is that as status is very important for the young millennial of today, not all of the brands that use status elements is quite accessible. Benini, from a very functional point of view, was quite accessible for them. From a price point, from an intrinsic point of view, Benini is a sparkling grape frizzante. So it's the sparkling wine of the ready-to-drink category. It's in a convenient format, and that's how the young black females rediscovered Benini, because it appealed to them in terms of what the image they want to portray to the world, but it also appealed to them in terms of their taste profiles. They like a sweet, light, sparkling product, but they don't necessarily have the ways and the means to buy the sparkling wines or the champagnes. So Benini, from a very functional point of view, basically made their image, or basically just elevated their image and the image that they want to portray to the world. So the business has decided to really back the growth of this product. We had to really go into insights to understand, but why is it that Benini is so appealing to this consumer? So it was really organic growth. So I would say that for the first 12 months, the growth that the brand has experienced was really functional, price right, brand packaging played a role, but we had to find the why. And as we've discovered that for the first 12 months that we've invested behind the brand, obviously the brand had to play up the functional credibility, the intrinsic, the extrinsics, but it actually became quite superficial. And we actually went back into research to understand, but why do you drink Benini? And what we've discovered is that this young, especially black female, is all about progress. She's still working it to make it. She's not really arrived. But she recognized her own truth. She's recognized that she's got a lot of opportunities that's out there for her, but she needs to work it. She needs to hustle it. And Benini basically just Benini enables her to sparkle and shine, and to actually give her that image that she wants to portray. So we have then decided, for Benini to actually move a little bit, not forgetting where we're coming from, because there is a functional know-how, there is a functional benefit of the brand. But how can we make sure that Benini can truly empower or enable females, because females is actually our target market, how can we enable females on this way of progression and really to understand where they're going? And that's where we've started unpacking our emotional benefits. We've started unpacking like-minded partners like Cosmopolitan, and that's what we've partnered with now, to really partner with networking events, collaborative events, to be present, to make sure that how can Benini actually be part and present in that environment where young females wants to really grow themselves, wants to really learn from the industry makers that they aspire to. How can we help them to actually just grow themselves?
Now, Tania, your event, I believe, was themed around hustle.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more?
So the theme was the Cosmopolitan Hustle Summit in partnership with Benini, and the theme was Boss Up. So it is all about hustling, it's all about progression, and it was really 500 young black females that came to this event, and we had about 10 industry newsmakers that talked and shared their inspiration and their know-how to the audience. So it was from boss up your finances, boss up your LinkedIn profile, boss up your personal brand, boss up your life from a wellness and a balance point of view. So it's really just trying to find like-minded topics that is really relevant to this young female in terms of how she would progress herself and what she needs on her journey. You know, when we think about what you need to create wealth for yourself or to grow your own personal brand, we sometimes default back to theory, to textbooks, to university degrees. But I think it's sometimes the simple elements that we know and live and aspire to every day that can actually just make yourself and grow yourself.
Now, Tania, let's trace a little bit back. In your own life, who inspired you? And maybe in your early days?
So I think, you know, if I have to think about who inspired me, being brought up in quite a strict Afrikaans family, it was quite traditional. Dad as the leader of the house, making the rules. But I think my mom really played a pivotal role in terms of who I am today. She really gave us comfort. She guided us through those troubled teen years. But I think my mother really played a pivotal role in terms of the human being I am today, from a character point of view. You know, she really allowed us to actually partake in everything we wanted. I never felt that she criticized me for not winning, for not being the best, but she criticized me for not wanting to participate. And I think that's the one thing that really stood by myself, that I really take forward in everything that I do, is that notion of participation. You don't have to always be the best. You don't always have to be the winner, but participate. And I think by participating, you learn. You learn to fail forward. You learn to deal with failing. I think you get exposed to lots of different people, different leadership styles, different interests that actually crafts you as a human being. And again, looking back, I think still today, I'm doing exactly the same. I'm really trying to encourage participation. Because if you don't participate, because you're not going to, if you don't participate because you can't win, I think then you've already failed. Because by participating, because there might be a chance for you to learn more, and 10 years down the line, you might recall what you've learned and practice what you've learned subconsciously. I think that is really the important thing, and I think that's something that my mom has actually instilled in both myself and my sister.
Tania, looking back over your career, you mentioned one major turning point where you reluctantly answered the call to join Distell, but is there another major turning point where things could have gone different in your career, but you took a certain decision to go this way?
You know, again, I think in the era that I grew up, having a solid career, climbing that corporate ladder was probably something that was expected of you. Subconsciously, that wasn't really something we openly spoke about as a family, or even in my career through the various positions I held from a development point of view. But I think the big turning point in my career was when I decided to change direction and actually break free from that traditional ladder going from one job grade to another. I've made the conscious decision that for 10 years I've been in the value chain, and I loved it because that's just I think my being loves structure, it loves process, it loves a start and a beginning. But I've also realized that probably my biggest transition from one position to another happened in my first 10 years in my career. And I had to understand that it was because I got bored. And boredom is not a nice word. But I realized that I've done my bit in each position. I wanted more. But what is more? And I've made the decision to then move backwards from a job grade point of view into my career, and went into project management and then the field of marketing, because I want to explore. I want to explore where this will take me. And I think thinking back, it was probably that need to unlock my love for creativity and innovation and change, and also my need to view or to share my opinions. And I think that marketing gives you the platform to share your opinions. Marketing gives you the platform to share the vision of your brand. And by virtue of sharing your vision for your brand on a very functional level, it gives you an opportunity to also share your thoughts about that vision, to instill your own thought leadership in that. And I think that was, from a very personal point of view, I think that was my turning point. Again, subconsciously. I don't think I've done everything. There was always this hunch. There was always this subconscious question that I've asked myself, and just, where do you really want to be? And I think the universe probably just played his part. And I think there's a bigger role for me out there. There's a bigger part for me to play in this universe. And I found myself in the field of marketing. So for the last 10 years, I've been in marketing. Yes, I've worked on different brands, different categories, but it was still marketing. And I think that is the platform, or that's actually that's the environment where I really started finding myself and finding my voice.
So Tania, what would you say is driving you today?
I almost want to rephrase that question in terms of who am I driving it for, and actually then what is driving me, because I think there is a functional and an emotional side around that. I think every day we hear stories about the young youth really trying to create wealth for themselves, really trying to be progressive, really want to share their opinions, want their voice to be heard. Lots of success stories. But there's also a big population of this young youth that's not necessarily that positive, that's not sharing that same need for progression, that is quite negative in terms of where they're going and what this country in particular can actually offer them. And I think that makes me very sad. Also a mother of 2 young boys, I think it's my responsibility to make sure that they grow into young, independent, forward-thinking men that can really make a change in this life. Not necessarily from a functional know-how point of view, but also who they are and their character and what they can offer to the world out there. So who am I driving it for? I think it's really my own two boys. But what I've also experienced is I'm driving it for the young generation in the environment that I am today. I found that I think I was quite accessible for them to come and actually talk to me, to ask for leadership guidance. Not formally, very informally, but I think my approach to having an open door policy actually is what they liked. I think my approach to leading them, my approach to developing them, my approach listening to them, bringing them onto my page, myself have to redefine myself to actually listen to their point of view. I think that is what's driving me forward. Understanding that I am dealing with a different generation that's got a different view about life, dealing with a generation that wants to be heard, and how am I changing myself to make myself accessible so that they can trust me and make their opinions count.
Now, Tania, let's talk about leadership. And I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
Okay, so the future of leadership, again, I want to answer this question from a human resources point of view and also then just from a brand innovation point of view, because I think the future of leadership isn't only the human resource element, but it's also how we redefine, from a marketing point of view, how do we redefine the products and the services that we actually need to build to be future fit. So just something I want to call is that the pace of life is accelerating, or life is accelerating at a pace that we actually can't keep up with. I think industries, organizations, brands, and HR departments needs to reinvent themselves to really be future fit, to almost be future proof. We are dealing with a generation that's very opinionated, that's got a completely different point of view than 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and we need to embrace that. So just from a human resource point of view, I think the traditional approach of top to bottom hierarchies and the way of leading teams and people, there is no place for that anymore. I think when leaders transforming themselves to be a little bit more agile, a little bit more resilient, having more empathy, bringing the new generation with them on this journey, I think that's the future of leadership. Again, that collaboration efforts, that networking efforts, that's important. You know, there's this very traditional way of leadership that's very theoretical, but I think the way that leadership needs to redefine themselves is to bring those people who needs to mobilize action with them. If you've got buy-in, it's much easier to mobilize action. If you're all sharing in the same vision, it's much easier to mobilize action. If it's the CEO sharing his vision from a one-dimensional point of view, there might be some resistance. But if it's a CEO or a team leader sharing a vision that is part of the team's vision for the future, it's much easier to mobilize action. And for me, that's the future of leadership from a human resource point of view, is that how do we make sure that we embrace this new generation that's actually the future leaders? How do we make sure that we transform ourselves currently to bring them on this journey so that we all work towards the same, well, a common goal?
So Tania, what have you learned from your own journey that you consider most important for building future leaders?
I think my own journey, what I've learned from my own journey is to be yourself, to be authentic. I think what I've learned through my journey is that I am a human and I am working with human beings. And all of us deal with change differently. Some are more resisting towards change, some deal with change better than others. But I think what I've learned from myself through this journey is to be yourself. To be very self-aware in terms of my own strengths, my own weaknesses, my own areas of development, being authentic in who I am. And if you're authentic and if you're true to yourself, people will see that. People will see that character shine through. They won't judge it. I think it makes you more approachable. And I think a leader needs to be approachable. A leader needs to inspire those around him. Doesn't matter the job title, doesn't matter the job grade. You know, you don't have to be a manager to be a leader. You can lead within your own team. So from my own personal journey, I think it's just understanding that we're all humans and we all need to change and actually just be there for one another.
Now, Tania, when you speak to future leaders, what is it you tell them about social media? How should they go about building their personal brand on social media? And I've seen you building your own brand on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So what is it? What kind of advice would you give them?
I think social media, no doubt, social media is the future of today. Doesn't matter the platform. I think social media was transformed when Mixit was introduced years ago. That was the very first social media channel where people connected. Now, social media is about connections. It's about networking. It's about sharing your opinion. Your post is your voice. And social media gives us the platform to share your voice. It's also far more efficient than traditional media. It's all about reach and frequency. So how many people can you actually share your opinions with, and what influence will that opinion have for them to actually reshare it? I think life is probably measured by reshares and retweets, but we should just remember that it shouldn't be superficial. I think a personal brand, we shouldn't think about building a personal brand any different to what you should think about marketing 101 from a brand and a product and a service point of view. I think you still have a story to tell. So what is your strategy in terms of telling your own story? What is your narrative going to be? From a functional point of view and from an emotional point of view. So those are your content pillars. How do you make sure that you define your narrative and you build your story around the narrative that makes sense for you, authentically makes sense for you? Then it's understanding who are those people that you want to talk to, who are those people that you want your story to be heard. And what influence will your story have on those people for them to want to reshare your story, to retweet your story? Actually about your strategy, and then it's also about those channels. And then you need to also make sure what is the social media channels that will make the biggest impact in terms of growing your personal brand. So traditionally there was Facebook and Instagram, and we've seen Instagram becoming an avenue of wealth. Again, this Instagram has always been known as the creative social media channel. It's where people share their Insta stories. It's where people give kudos to brands. Influencer marketing has exploded on Instagram. We've seen that the social media channel of choice for young black females especially is Instagram, because that's where they share their knowledge out of their lounge. That's where they share their knowledge around the service that or the product that they have to offer. And that is actually how you build your personal brand. LinkedIn, from a personal point of view, absolutely effective. But again, LinkedIn is not, it is a social media channel that you need to treat it a bit differently from any other social media channel that's out there. LinkedIn, I think, is about really instilling that personal brand. I think LinkedIn is a channel where you can really make your content pillars or your content strategy for yourself work hard, and make sure that those who you want to connect with hear the story, but also understand who you are beyond just a post, beyond just an article that you've posted, beyond just your functional know-how.
Now, Tania, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored somebody and that person took your advice to heart?
2015, I was working in global marketing, and we had marketing interns fresh out of varsity that joined our team. And there was this lady, Natasha Dash, And she was a young vibe. She was wise beyond her years when she just started there. But her aspirations was in marketing. And I think subconsciously, I mentored her through that very first early stages of her career. It was a year mentorship, a year internship at Distell in the RTD category, and I remember always just being her go-to person. I remember her never fearing to ask for guidance. I remember myself telling her many times, don't suffer in silence. No question is a dumb question. Don't fear to ask a question. You don't have to always know the answers. You have to ask if you don't understand. And I think by virtue of that, trying to almost give her a safe environment to grow herself in, to find herself in. I could say that I've mentored her, but I think I've mentored her more in terms of believing in herself and believing in terms of what she can do than only the functional capabilities within the team. And after a 1 year internship, she's been employed by Distell, and she's really making waves. She's working in the Africa division at the moment, and not once but numerous times. I'm really quite surprised and inspired when we meet up about the compliments that she gives me, that you are the reason who I am today. You are the reasons why I'm at Distell today. And I'm surprised and humbled by that every time, because it was never a conscious thing. It was just the way that I'm trying to be there for people. It was never really, being a mentor was never a conscious thing for me. It was really just something that was instilled probably by my mother back in the day. And that's the way I know. Being there for people, trying to comfort them, having empathy, having an open door policy, being approachable, being authentic, I think. That is maybe why people might have seen me as a mentor.
Now, Tania, are there any role models of leadership that you would recommend future leaders should study and maybe learn from?
Marie Folio's got a TV channel, marie.tv, and her entire construct is actually building around leaders who write inspirational books. So her entire construct is books, and she invites those future leaders and those inspirational newsmakers into her studio. And her entire construct is so conversational. I think, we shouldn't get stuck on the theory and the basically just the disciplines or the structure. It's actually conversational, and what can we learn from one another. So Marie Folio for me is actually a person who I basically listen to her podcasts quite frequently. But I think role models, I think a role model doesn't necessarily have to be a TV personality. A role model doesn't necessarily have to have a title. A role model can be something as simple in terms of a person in your company, a person that you aspire to, a person that you might have never met. I think a role model is somebody that you maybe see yourself in. And what is the little bits and pieces that you can take from that person to actually build your own character? So, I think we should not get stuck in terms of who or what that role model has done. I think it's how can we actually just put ourselves out there and listen to people who inspires us, and how can we really build ourselves based on what we learn from that and how those people has actually inspired us.
Now, Tania, how can our listeners reach out to you, and where can they follow you?
So I think LinkedIn is my channel of choice at the moment. all my thought leadership I try to share on LinkedIn. So it's the Tania Kotze at gmail.com is my email address. The Tania Kotze is my website, and it clicks through to my LinkedIn profile.
Right. And last but not least, Tania, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should implement in their own lives?
I think my motto lately is progress, not perfection. And I think, there is nothing like perfection. There isn't the perfect role, there isn't the perfect role model, but it's about progression. And I think the one thing that I want leaders to actually just take to heart is how can you actually be more self-aware so that you can be a better person for those that you want to lead.
Well, Tania, thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you so much.
And your wisdom into the future of leadership, and reminding us that we should focus on progress and not always on perfection.